welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Turn the Page. I'm your host today, Jen, and today I am back with an author who graced us with a visit last year to talk about one of my favorite reads in 2025. It was a beautiful sci-fi cozy mystery, just with that hit all the right buttons for me. It was such a warm hug of a read, and I am so excited to talk about the next in the series. So welcome. Could I ask you to introduce yourself and your book, please?
Sure thing. Hello, everyone. I'm Olivia Waite. I've been a romance writer, sci-fi and fantasy author, and the current romance fiction columnist for the New York Times Book Review. Nobody's Baby, which is the book we're talking about today, is the second in the Dorothy Gentleman sapphic sci-fi mystery series. They're short novellas set on a interstellar cruise ship in deep space, and instead of the normal generation ship where, you have several generations of people, you have a book in the library that stores all your memories, and every time your body wears out, you get printed a new one. And so it's like 1,000 years vacation, but also because we have thousands of people in space, there are still crimes to figure out. And so in the first book, Dorothy solved her first mystery and introduced us to the world. And now in this second book, we're kind of deepening some of the communities on board and taking a further look at how these processes work, which sounds very paperwork oriented, and it kind of is, I guess, but it's in a fun way. And in Nobody's Baby, what happens is, because we're on a spaceship, and we have 1,000 years to go, they've decided to just pause fertility. Nobody's supposed to be having babies because it's just too complicated to think about in deep space. So suddenly a wild baby appears. How did it get there? Who does it belong to? How can Dorothy keep her nephew Ruthie from trying to adopt it? And so that's basically our mystery. And everybody, of course, is horrified when they see the baby because they're not supposed to be here. So it's kind of like a very cozy alien. like
It's such a fascinating world, and I loved having the opportunity to get a little bit deeper into it because even in the first book, even given that it's a novella and it's so efficient in how you convey a lot of world building in a short amount of time, this allowed you to explore a little bit more, and you went in such interesting directions. So what was it that occurred to you first with conceiving of conceiving the
hmm.
sequel? um was it the idea of how a baby would disrupt this ecosystem? Where was the inception point?
Well, I think part of it was I was thinking a lot about romance tropes because, romance author. And one of the ones that I've never gotten to do before is a trope called secret baby. And it's exactly what it sounds like. Somebody has a secret baby. It's usually the heroine for obvious reasons, where like the hero discovers that due to a one night stand or a long ago relationship, he actually has a child he's never known about. And then in the process of working out custody and feelings and everything, usually the two characters find their way back into romance. And I've always been really like, there's a lot of ways in which this trope is usually not my jam. But I've always been fascinated by like the sci-fi potential of it. Like things like, well, what if the hero has the secret baby because he took a sample of the heroine's DNA and had her cloned? Things like that. Like something about the Thing and McMurdo Station seemed like it seemed appropriate. But so the question here became kind of a puzzle for me of how could you have a baby that somebody didn't remember having? That how could we, because the idea behind the Fairweather as a ship is supposedly memory is permanent and continuous. And of course, no, it's not. Everybody who's ever tried to back up a hard drive at some point knows that like permanent memory storage is always going to break somewhere. And so the game of the series is trying to find all those breakpoints in this supposedly continuous memory system. And it's fun, is what it is. And then once you kind of have your puzzle, you put some people around it and give them opinions, and the mystery kind of grows itself, which is extremely fun.
Yeah, I never really thought about it until you put it that way, but crafting a mystery and having folks express all their opinions, it's a really, again, like a novella having to be very efficient. Like you get to do a
Yeah.
lot of like both plot work and character work like at the same time with that. That's kind of, it seems like you always have to kind of be doing two things at once in order
Yes.
to do like a novella like this. So
Yeah, it is a lot to bite off. I think that's why I like it so much because there's no there's always something interesting to be doing. There's no like padding in a novella, which is like when in doubt, skip over it. If you find you need it, you'll go back and add it later. So they're very fun to write because you only have to write the fun bits and then kind of fill in the bits you need.
I'd love to talk a little bit more about, the ways that you expand the world building in this second book, particularly in regards to all of these sort of restrictions on reproduction and sort of
Mhm.
how this particularly disrupts like the sort of equilibrium of this generation ship. How did you like thinking through like the memory tech, and sort of
Yeah.
how that all affects like this need for a pause on reproduction while we're traveling to our next sort of destination.
Mhm.
Yet, I guess I'm really losing track of this question, but the ways that human foibles kind of tend to like, waylay our best laid plans.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's about this idea that humans are always trying to devise perfect systems, like whether we're writing them into a book or whether we're like creating them in law or technology. We always want to make things kind of waterproof, like, watertight and perfect and no flaws. And we're in fact very, very bad at this. We keep pretending like it's possible and it's kind of not. And so for me, a lot of the most interesting questions happen in that tension where a supposedly perfect system breaks down and how do you treat the exceptions? And that's true in the case of like the memory books. If somebody gets a memory book erased, what do you do about it? How does it affect relationships? How does it affect who you think you are? How does it affect the choices that you're making? Especially because so much of who a person is depends on what that person remembers. The things that happened to them have changed them. If you don't remember the happening, you don't get the changes either. And so this ties in with babies because babies are fun to write. Babies are amazing to write. They can be adorable, they can be sweet, or they can be absolute nightmares that everybody is freaked out by, often at the same time. So it's a great little joke. Um, it's just they're so fun. They're so fun to play with. And you can do so many things with a baby that aren't just, oh my gosh, it's adorable and vulnerable, we need to protect it. That there's also like the baby does not understand rules. The baby does not understand logic. If the baby wants to scream, the baby is going to scream, and there is literally nothing you can do to it to stop. And so, yeah, so this is where like kind of the horror element comes in, especially because these people are at this point, I think we're about 400 years, something like that, 300 to 400 years. At some point, somebody will probably try and nail down my timeline, and I wish them the best of luck. Um, because we're hundreds of years out of practice at raising children at this point, which is again one of those things where everybody wants to have a perfect system. You want to give the child a good education, you want them to feel loved, you want them to feel like they can achieve their highest potential, but the kid's going to make decisions that you can't anticipate. Events are going to transpire, you're going to make mistakes as a parent or relative or teacher, and how you react to those mistakes is almost as important as not making the mistake in the first place. And so part of the question with this baby is how is this baby to be legally understood on the Fairweather? Like they did not plan for this. Everybody else has established identities and legal rights and responsibilities. They have a framework for creating like new persons, but they weren't supposed to activate it until planetfall because planetfall is when, and I don't know if I've actually said this, but this is how the series is planned. When they reach the planet, the body printing stops. So you get this long 1,000-year vacation, but once we actually arrive at our destination, that's it. That's your last body. You're stuck with this. Death is coming for you. Enjoy. Because I don't really like immortality stories. I always find that like suspect.
it's hard to write immortality stories because stories sort of have to end to have meaning. So
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
And yeah, death puts that punctuation on both stories and human life. Like that's what it kind of reverberates back.
Yeah. I really enjoyed your point about, sort of the role that the baby's vulnerability plays in the story, and how characters react to that. But babies also make the adults around them very vulnerable. And
Yes.
that kind of happens regardless of whether they are view themselves as people who want children or don't, or are good with kids or don't. I think
Yes.
really interested how Ruthie and John both react to this baby in very different ways, but it really brings out quite vulnerable parts of them.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Well, and that's the thing is when you see something vulnerable like a child, how you react does tell us so much about how you perceive vulnerability. Like there are people who become angry and anxious at any sign of weakness, even if it's not their own. And that's like you show those people a baby and they immediately like stiffen up. What are we doing? Why babies? And then you see the people who see something vulnerable and immediately love it and want to protect it and like are attached to it in a very unself-conscious kind of way. And it feels like that should be a vulnerability and it ends up being a huge strength. And so, like, I mean, it makes it's a vulnerability in the sense that it leaves you open to like emotional devastation if, say, this baby that you love decides not to love you back. But also that's just the risks you take.
Absolutely.
And so that's always a question in my head as a romance author is I always try very hard to make love not something that people earn.
Mhm.
Like relationships can be broken by mistakes and you don't deserve to give people endless second chances, but love is not something that you can earn. Love is not something you can demand as a debt.
Mm.
That there always has to be this I was raised Catholic. There always has to be an element of grace. There always has to be something magical and inexplicable and miraculous about it. And
Mm.
that's true whether it's romantic love or the love between a parent and their child, that there's always something a little bit inexplicable.
Absolutely. That's really interesting. It has made me reflect on one of the questions that I tend to ask romance writers is some variation on their approach to tension and like how you balance those
Yes,
is like the forces pushing them together and those pulling them apart. But another way to kind of view that and a way that and it applies beyond romantic love is like the tension between the parts of you trying to open up and those that are trying to stay protected and closed and.
exactly.
Mhm.
And Dorothy is very naturally defensive. She's always been like a wary, prickly person. She's lost a lot of people in her life, and so she's very hesitant to trust. She's quick to anticipate, but hesitant to actually put herself out there.
Mm.
And so this contrasts very strongly with both Ruthie, who is, of course, like he'll fall in love with anything at like the drop of a hat. It's just his nature. That's who he is. And John, who's, more sincere. He doesn't trust easily, but when he does like with his whole heart. And there's always a part of Dorothy that's kind of holding back.
Mm.
And so seeing Dorothy both love her nephew and her nephew knows that she loves him, but they do have a bit of tension where she's always kind of trying to pretend like they don't both know this. And some of that is just because it's more fun as a detective to write that. And some of it is just I think some of that does come from me that I am a person who gets both very excited and curious and interested about things, but also like if I meet somebody and 10 minutes later they're saying they're my best friend, I'm like, are we though? We'll see. We'll see, So there's always a part of me that's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be chatty and fun and interested, but also we're keeping the real thoughts in the back until I actually know you.
Yes. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so the Dorothy Ruthie tension is a little bit like the two instincts that I'm always kind of caught between just put out onto the page, which is also a fun thing that authors get to do is take things you either like or distrust about yourself, put them on a person, wind it up and see where they go.
Yeah, that is so interesting. And yeah, I love Ruthie. He's such a like a golden retriever of a person. Like he's just like
Mhm.
all heart and like just wears everything on his sleeve. And it's really fun to see him and Dorothy bounce off each other. I love Dorothy's voice so much. Just like it is so fun to sort of spend time in her perspective and just to hear her commentary on things. She's that like there's a bit of the sort of like noir-y detective to her, but it's like
Yeah, a little bit.
softer and kinder and
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, she's got just a little bit of Chandler because I just love Chandler so much.
Yes.
But like less less misanthropic than that.
Mhm. Absolutely. So you also meet more of Dorothy's coworkers, which I enjoy, got to know them a little bit better.
Yes.
Is there a supporting character who was your favorite to write, and the flip side one who was the hardest to crack?
Well, some of the detectives that we haven't seen enough of yet, that's because I haven't quite figured them out. But we've got a book three where we learn a little bit more about at least one of them. And the other two, I feel like there are future stories lurking in the mist. Um, I think most of it was me just having fun with the various detective types. Like you can look at them and you're like, aha, that's our Peter Wimsey guy. And this is our like, working class turned detective, man on the street type, like playing against type for the Sherlock Holmes. And then you've got like the art forgery investigator, which I don't know if you've seen. This didn't exist at the time, so I did not think about this actively, but there's a new mystery series called Bookish with Mark Gatiss. Phenomenal. But he's like tall and kind of sardonic and intelligent, but also like deeply secretly kind. And it's magnificent. I mean, it's a 6 episode series and it's just so much fun and so well done. And so part of it was just me saying how many detectives can I put in here for all the mystery people to be like, "Oh, what kind of story are we gonna get?" And then of course, like there's Meherbai, which is the one she's the detective that we know the best. And man, she's just so fun. She's a bit tomboyish and she's a bit more impulsive than Dorothy, but they share kind of that sense of waiting for somebody else to make a mistake first. That Dorothy covers it by being like kind of wry and holding back, and Meherbai covers it with being kind of, you know, provocative and outspoken, but it's the same impulse underneath. And so they have this really good connection that I was excited about. And then so she was a delight, and I just love thinking about her, and I'm looking forward to seeing where she goes in future installments. But the other one was Leloup, who I knew from Jump was going to be the worst, and he was so much fun.
Yeah, he is the worst, but he is so much fun.
He's terrible.
Yeah. There's like a sort of I don't know, not theatricality, but just a sort of like melodrama to
Oh
his
yeah, he's campy as all get out. He's a
Yeah.
fussy little bitch of a man.
Yeah. And I think, it really makes sense with all of these coworkers like embodying different sort of detective archetypes because this is also a world where like movies matter. We see a lot
Yes.
about like the world of cinema here. We have people who are employed by it and like the movie
Hmm.
titles and everything, the projectionists, all that. So like that's probably a lot of people's main experience of detectives, like a lot of us, we mostly probably
Yeah.
know TV detectives more than like in real life.
Exactly, yeah. Well, and speaking of perfect systems, like there's a lot of articles that have been coming out in the past few years about how things like, blood spatter analysis and hair pattern things are just absolutely bunk made up for TV stuff. And it's like they need an excuse to have narrative clues, and so they made up these things and police wanted to get convictions, so things like that. Like the one that really broke me, I think, was fingerprint analysis. That, yeah, people's fingerprints can be distinctive, but they're not like unique snowflakes like we've all been taught to assume. Like they can be smudged, they can look exactly like other people's, they can like granted, if you get the five people most closely connected, like your five like top suspects, odds that their fingerprints resemble each other are like basically zero. But you have to have a good print. You have to know when it was put there. Like there's all these different variables. Whereas if you like have something like a fingerprint database, the idea that you're going to get a perfect match out of there is like zero. It's like none because there's going to be so many things that look very similar, and computer systems are very bad at making recognitions just like this. I mean, as we're seeing with AI right now.
Yeah, there is I think TV gives us a very inaccurate view of the solve rate of crime,
Yeah.
because it's kind of 100% on most crime shows.
Yeah.
they work out everything more or less, and that's not really how it works.
Yeah, well, the purpose of the mystery is to uncover the truth, so like you kind of have to, but that's why it's so frustrating when you see like the police solve rate doing that kind of thing and you're like, no. And there's been a lot of talk about this in the past few years, especially after George Floyd and all of that, and it's been really productive, like in terms of people understanding how much like propaganda we've been exposed to. And so one of the other things that I'm always trying to do with this series is draw that line really brightly between people who are here to figure out the truth and people who are here to punish criminals, because I don't feel those are the same thing. We pretend like they are.
Mm.
Like, and Law and Order has ruined us for this a lot, where they're like, okay, well, we gathered the evidence, but then, oh no, we talked to a guy when we didn't have a warrant, so we can't use that evidence. But now the guilty man will go free. And I'm like, well, yeah, you screwed up. You're supposed to have the warrant. That's a rule for a reason.
Yeah.
It's so you can't just make up evidence. It's so you can't violate, like you should be able to convict someone without violating constitutional rights. That's the challenge, guys. But
Mm.
we've kind of come to this understanding that the best cop is a maverick cop who breaks all of the constitutional rules. And as we're finding, that goes bad in the long run pretty fast.
Mm.
So,
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really great point. That we're constantly being told by these TV shows and movies. There was just one that I watched this past weekend with Ben Affleck and Matt Damon that just came out on Netflix, The Rip, and they're constantly lamenting not having more power or the restrictions that so and so statute is placing on them that's keeping them from like putting this bad guy away, and so
yeah,
it's yeah, there's a lot to unpack about how all these traditional narratives, especially procedural, sort of.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Hmm.
so I think that's why I'm gravitating a lot more toward procedurals where they're not police detectives. Like some things I can't really resist. Like Elspeth just tickles a sweet spot in me. I just love it. Like the structure of the stories is so good and the Columbo pattern there is so great. Like Columbo and Elspeth are kind of my well, yes, like a cab, but also I love these. I love the way the story shapes go. So sorry guys. But the difference between that and like whatever procedural it is that catches a different serial killer like every week. And it's like, guys, no, no, like we need to understand that like I just keep thinking the title of the show is Law and Order. The title of the show is not Justice, and that matters.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Wow. Yeah, that is so much to think about and such a heady stuff to come up for such a cozy book altogether. But I think that this the book does grapple a lot with surveillance technology as well. And
Yeah.
because it's very I hope this isn't a spoiler, it's pretty early in the book, but like it's very easy to track down who the parents of this child are because of the
Yeah.
ways that the genetics of people have been manipulated and all this stuff. So I don't know, it does speak a little bit to me of the AI debate, especially with, oh gosh, there's one scene where you talk about that there are new movies being made for the first time because people are
Yeah.
imagining, actor mashups that couldn't have happened and so on.
Well,
Um,
that started like very early on in the ship. So they've been doing that for like let's say 200 years at this point. But
mhm.
yeah, but you're never going to stop people from actually trying to make up new stories.
Yeah.
That it started as just this, oh yeah, we're going to project the movies we remember onto the screen, but then people are like, what's the difference between a memory and imagination? Turns out, from the text perspective, zero. From the text perspective, you can just slap any old thing up there. But
Yeah.
it is, yeah, it is something I'm always thinking about is the way that surveillance works. One of the things that I like about retrofuturist settings like this is this sense of playing with which technologies have been carried forward into the future and which have not. And so you'll notice nobody like has video phones, for instance. Like in my head, this is kind of the golden age mystery 20s and 30s, where we didn't have television yet. We didn't have like this, even like the Star Trek view screen. Like Star Trek's a very, very television focused TV show, shockingly. But if you had something from the 20s instead, like everything's like movies exist, but they're community spaces. They're places you go where people create the art for you. They're almost a form of theater as opposed to like a recorded experience. And so it was very important to me that like nobody does video calls. We don't have footage of people going into places. We can kind of track them sort of like Fairy especially knows where everybody is just because of the physical markers because Fairy builds all the bodies. And Fairy also, as we see in the book at one point, knows that they can count the heartbeats to know how many people they have on the ship. And so it's really always a challenge and I think it also, if I may, it's a little bit of an out for me as an author because honestly, it's, you know, those jokes about how if Seinfeld had cell phones, none of the episodes would be possible. It's a little bit like that. You can do a lot of the Golden Age mystery style patterning things in a way where if we had video footage of who was, say, going into a specific door at a specific time, it'd be like, oh, mystery solved. But instead, we have to find some other way of figuring out who that was. And that takes up some narrative time and gives us a chance to do more like character work and tension.
It's another way to kind of hint at or allow the reader to think about the different values that's kind of separate the culture we're reading about from the one that we're inhabiting. If they're the similarities and the differences, because
Right.
Perhaps different technologies survive and others don't because of a different sort of like landscape of values and goals and priorities,
Right. And sometimes, like when I started writing these books, it was back in 2020. So AI was barely a blip, especially like Gen AI and the generative stuff. It wasn't really, we were still in kind of that mode where writing a sentient robot mind was something fun you got to do without like feeling like it was bashing modern day people in the face. And now we're in a very different space. And so in planning for future books, currently there's 3 books slated for this series, but this place lives in my head and I'm always kind of wondering, especially with something like a ship mind, which is something that I remember reading about when I was a kid in all the McCaffrey books. And there's been various sentient spaceships, like the Eliot de Bodard books do wonderful things with this, and of course Anne Leckie. But even like Douglas Adams, or there's another one, an older one. I can't remember. I can't remember if it's not the Expanse. What's the other one? The Ian.
Oh.
Banks, that's the one. Ian Banks has like complicated ship stuff happening as well. I tried, man. I tried that series and I'm like, I'm just not having enough fun to spend time here.
Yeah.
And it's not about the coziness, like, because I find Macbeth very fun. So it's clearly not like I don't need 0 knives in my fiction, but I'd like fewer finger smashings than the first book of that. Like,
yeah, that is a big feature.
Yeah,
that
and
they
I'm like,
front load.
I'm like, well, I tried. Anyways, moving on. Life is short. But the idea of like a sentient mind piloting the ship now has these implications of like, well, how sentient are we talking? Do we have rights and responsibilities to think about? Like, how do you deal with a ship mind? What if a ship mind needs a vacation? These questions are going to come up. Did we create Fairy for a purpose? Are they considered a person? How does this work? And these are questions that I haven't had a chance to ask yet, but that's what future books are for.
Well, I'm so glad to hear that there are future books. I will read every book in this world because I just really enjoy the people who live in it and getting to explore this really fascinating society just forever and ever. I could do this forever. So thank you for taking time out of your schedule to talk about this one with us. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Jen. This has been a delight as always.
Thank you. All right, listeners, please check out Nobody's Baby. And if you haven't yet, check out Murder by Memory first. You will enjoy both these reads. Just really phenomenal books. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. It is time to close this chapter. We'll see you next time.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.